Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is of course my 300th video. I'm so glad to have come this far, and in honor of that I want to do a video that I've been meaning to do for a while. That is my Blu-ray collection. I finally hit 100 Blu-rays, and these 100 films or television seasons, etc. are things that of course mean a lot to me. These don't necessarily represent my 100 favorite films of all time. Nonetheless, these are films that I thought were worthy of owning, worthy of the format, had great special features, were visually stunning in some cases, and ultimately are films that I'm certainly happy to own. This collection is going to grow as time goes on. Nonetheless, I'm going to take you through it alphabetically with a few minor exceptions wherein I have certain films part of series clubbed together. Now, the first film I'm going to talk about is The Amazing Spider-Man. Definitely a film that I absolutely enjoyed, one of the best origin stories that I've ever really seen put to film. And the fact is, I was so surprised with this film. It's my favorite Spider-Man film of them all, and even visually there is a lot to love in this film. Now if you're looking for that untold story that we were to hear about or at least see in this film, there are some deleted scenes included on the Blu-ray, so it's definitely worth picking up in my personal opinion. Next up, we have American Hustle, the critically acclaimed film that of course got 10 Academy Award nominations. My personal favorite film of 2013. I know that there are people out there that didn't necessarily love it as much as I did, but I definitely think that this film was worth owning simply because of how fantastic it is. Each of the performances are at least something to take away from the film, if not what I believe is an incredible human story. This Blu-ray does have some features, but I do believe that it's worth more of a pickup if you really enjoyed the film. Of course, a film that you need to have in your collection is Argo. It won Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and now there is a declassified edition that has come out for Argo more recently, an extended edition with a lot of extra features. I wish I could have picked that up, but honestly, I'm fine owning just the film in itself. I didn't love it to that degree, but I definitely think it was one of the best films of its year, and certainly the cinematography is fantastic, which adds to the fact that you need to purchase this on Blu-ray. I mean, come on, would any collection be complete without Avatar? What is undoubtedly the film responsible for the 3D revolution is certainly a film worth owning on Blu-ray. Blu-ray 3D, in fact, if you're really into that, and a good number of special features on this, no doubt. But I have to say that this film is so visually just impeccable and stunning, and for that reason I'm looking forward to the sequels. While there are some story-based issues that people tend to point out and take fault with, I certainly have to say that this film is a must-buy. If you're looking to have a Blu-ray collection, I'm going to name a few films that are definitely worth owning, and this is one of them. Next up, a film I'm sure a lot of you might not be aware of. This is Batman Gotham Knight, one of the first few Blu-rays I actually got. It is an animated film of Batman between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, telling really interesting stories divided into about 6 parts. Certainly worth owning, actually. It does look great on Blu-ray, and I do feel that it had a really incredible story to it. 6 very different stories that all came together, and what I believe is certainly a worthy animated Batman film. Next up, of course, I have the first 5 seasons of The Big Bang Theory. I'm definitely going to pick up 6 and 7. I'm a big fan of the show. I do agree to the fact that it has declined in terms of its quality over the recent years. However, those first 4 seasons especially were nothing short of fantastic. I do understand if I might get a little bit of hate for owning these simply because the show has a really mixed reaction and a mixed audience. Nonetheless, I feel like this is one of the better sitcoms. Certainly not my favorite show of all time. I would love to pick up something like How I Met Your Mother or The Office, which aren't available on Blu-ray, however. Nonetheless, The Big Bang Theory seasons 1 through 5 is a worthy pickup for any fan. Of all the Bond films, I thought this is the one to own simply because of how much I loved it. This collector's edition comes with a second disc with a crazy amount of features, of course, in what I believe is visually a stunning Blu-ray to own. And I would say, much like Avatar, this is one you have to add to your collection. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about. This is Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy with Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and my favorite of the 3, in fact, The World's End. These are all 3 great comedies. Certainly some of the funniest films I've perhaps ever seen, which makes Edgar Wright such a great director. His unique style is really visible in each of these films, and my God, if you have not seen these films, while they are certainly lesser known, I feel like they deserve a much larger audience, and in watching these, you will certainly see why. Best Picture winning Crash is a film that I did really enjoy. I love the interconnectedness of the story. Visually, it does present a lot of good things in the Blu-ray. I wouldn't say it's the most visually stunning film out there, but I did believe that, at least for my purpose, it was worth owning. I did think it was a really good film. However, I do understand a lot of the problems that people have with it today. I hate having so many must-owns in a row, but these three, a lot of people I'm sure already have. That is the Dark Knight trilogy. This iteration of the character was something so fantastic, something that of course has revolutionized comic book films today and action films today. My personal favorite is The Dark Knight Rises. I do understand I'm in the minority on that, but that doesn't mean that I don't love these three films to an extremely high end. But perhaps one of the greatest Best Picture winning films of all time has got to be The Departed. My God, Martin Scorsese is a fantastic director. This is a film that really exposed me to a lot of his other filmography. This is the film that made me realize the potential of film in general, and of course what Martin Scorsese is capable of doing. And I was wowed by this. I've seen it multiple times. It's certainly worth owning. There's a lot of cool features on this one as well. And Mark Wahlberg, Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson all in one film, all fantastic as well. This is another must-own. Action classic Die Hard is definitely renowned as one of the best action films of all time. It's incredibly intense, of course, and this is the film that really has its stamp on the classics of cinema, if you will. Renowned as one of the best for good reason, might I add. A very simple film. Looking at the sequels of the series, I can certainly say I'm not a fan of all of them. If I were to pick up another one, it would be Die Hard with a Vengeance. But trust me, this film is worth owning on Blu-ray. In my personal opinion, Quentin Tarantino's best, Django Unchained, is one holy shit of a film. And that weirdly positive, energetic, and grotesque spirit that Quentin Tarantino is good at infusing in his films, it's certainly so evident in this film. And what I believe has some of the greatest performances, including, in my opinion, Leonardo DiCaprio's best performance to date. Django Unchained is such a fantastic film. Arguably, David Fincher's best, Fight Club, is a film that I had to pick up. This is, in fact, the 100th Blu-ray that I picked up, and I'm surprised it took me so long. I only actually really saw it earlier this year for the first time, and I'm just as surprised as you are. It's on IMDb's top 10. While that is certainly not the best way to measure the quality of a film, I have to say that it's still not an easy task to get yourself up there. And my God, this film is so incredibly bizarre and yet so incredibly fantastic. I'm still at a loss for words after months having seen it. And I can tell you this, you gotta pick this up. It's so weirdly fun, and Tyler Durden is certainly one of the finest characters to be put on film. Finding Nemo is a beautiful film, not just in terms of the animation of it alone, but in fact, in terms of the very emotional story that it does tell about a father and his son. And I do have to say that this film really spoke to me, especially after I picked it up on Blu-ray and saw it again after many years, knowing that I loved it back in the day, but had a newfound appreciation for it when I got to witness it. In fact, some of the features are really cool, especially say you're having a party. On the bonus disc, there's this aquarium that just runs for 4 or 5 hours, and it's a great thing to just have on your TV. There's a lot of little features here and there that you get in all the Pixar Blu-rays that make the Pixar Blu-rays at least certainly worth owning. Another Best Picture winner that does have a bit of a divided response to it, but I'm on the side of this is, in my opinion at least, one of the most incredible films that I've ever seen. While I might own 5 seasons of The Big Bang Theory, I unfortunately only own the first season of Friends. I'm still getting through it right now. I love this show. It's certainly renowned as one of the best comedies of all time for good reason. And I do have to say that I'm going to be picking up the next 9 seasons over the course of time. Add them to the list of must-owns. The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 are, of course, once again, renowned as classics, some of the best of all time. But I do have to say, despite their incredible length, these 2 films alone span over 6 hours and almost 20 minutes, in fact. These are some of the best, not just mafia films, but even to some degree family dramas. There's a lot of intense things that goes on, not just in the acting, but the way they're shot is a style that you won't see that often in film in general, but you can also see how certain elements of these films inspired a lot of techniques used today. A must-own, Gravity, in 3D. Need I say more? While I can certainly admit that The Hangover Part 2 is not nearly as good as The Hangover Part 1, I think upon repeat viewings of the second film, I really learned and grew to enjoy it a lot more. The first Hangover film is one of the best comedy films to have come out in the last 10 years, in my opinion. And these two films actually look surprisingly good on Blu-ray. The first Hangover film especially has some great special features. Most Blu-ray collectors would be familiar with this next sight, 8 of the Harry Potter films, spanning, of course, the adaptations of the 7 books, in films that I believe that got better as they went along. I'm still not sure which one is my favorite, but I'm choosing between either The Prisoner of Azkaban or one of the last 2 films. I think those last 2 films were really good, and of course Deathly Hallows Part 1 tends to get overlooked for some reason. These are certainly films that of course have a great number of visual effects that get better as time goes along. I think visually, if I had to say, it's really the 6th one, The Half-Blood Prince, that had the best cinematography and therefore looks the best on Blu-ray, but all of these films are worth owning if you're a fan of films and of course a fan of the series. Add this to the list of must-owns, one of the most original and creative films to have hit the silver screen in years. Of course, once again, showing the fact that Christopher Nolan is a genius director, in my opinion. Nominated for Best Picture, Inception is one of the best Blu-rays, I believe, that is to own. It's a must-own to be added to the list. And my God, even the special features on this, taking you through how they constructed, for example, the rotating hallway scene, was absolutely genius, giving you insight into an incredible film. Pixar's The Incredibles is of course a film that I believe is worth owning just because of the real family story behind it. Of course you can tell of the great inspiration it took from the Fantastic Four. At the same time, this incredibly intense non-stop story with some of the beautiful action scenes that look great in animation and on Blu-ray, of course. Definitely worth owning, and definitely one of Pixar's best. Now, while the Indiana Jones trilogy has a lot of its supporters, and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull tends to get pushed on the sidelines, I do have to say that I actually really enjoyed that 4th film as well, and definitely thought it was worth picking up. Owning these 4 films is something I believe is essential to me just because of how big a fan I am of the franchise, and of each of these films individually. The Last Crusade has got to be my favorite. Another in the list of Quentin Tarantino films that I own, Inglourious Basterds, is one spectacular film. Of course, it is the film that really showed the world Christoph Waltz's talent. Such an incredibly unique, pulpy tale of World War II, something I never expected to say ever in life, but something that is unlike anything you'll really ever see. Another one of Christopher Nolan's films, one of his earlier films in fact, Insomnia, has 2 incredible performances, that of Al Pacino and of course the late Robin Williams. It's a film with fantastic cinematography by Wally Pfister, which makes it all the more worthy of being owned on Blu-ray. The more recently released on Blu-ray, Interstellar, of course came out just last year in November and was one of the most visually captivating films I've ever seen, one of my absolute favorites of last year, and a must-own in my opinion. Of course, it hasn't got that kind of traction just as yet, so I might not add it to the list, but definitely I feel in the long run it's going to be one of those films. The special features are absolutely fantastic, giving you, once again, incredible insight into how this film was really undertaken, the essence of practicality about it, and what I believe is a sci-fi landmark. Another one of last year's most beloved is The Lego Movie, a film that of course not just kickstarted some of the success of Chris Pratt. At the same time, while it was snubbed at the Oscars for Best Animated Feature Film, it is not only one of the most visually stunning films I've seen, but one of the funniest films I've seen in a while. And at the same time, of course, is a film that has the most unique looking animation. One of sci-fi's best, in my opinion, in the last few years. It really shows the fact that Rian Johnson is a great director and, of course, brought him to the forefront, and really, I guess, gave him the opportunity to undertake Star Wars Episode 8 is Looper, with such a unique and original premise. It's a film that, of course, does have a lot of great visual style to it, but really, it's this story that is so captivating of a man in the present having to, in fact, assassinate his future self for reasons as explained in the film, creating not only one of the most complicated and intricate films in the sci-fi realm, but at the same time, one of the most intriguing. It's been over 20 years and this film is still being watched by many today for good reason, because The Lion King is fucking awesome. Just look at these films. I mean, I don't know where to begin. The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. The Lord of the Rings Extended Edition, in fact, which includes a 15-disc collection that came in a unique box as well, that of course I still own to this day. This is a must-own just because of not how great the films are, but these extended editions come up to make the trilogy almost 12 hours long, over 12 hours if you count the credits, and there are 9 discs. I repeat, 9 discs. However, those 9 discs are DVDs of special features, and this is something that's going to take you days, weeks, or even a month to finish all the way through. And my God, if you're a fan of Middle-earth or a fan of just great films, to see one of the best trilogies come to life, you have got to, I repeat, got to own the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition trilogy. A massive collection of 10 films so far. Of course, the 11th was released ever so recently, and I'm definitely going to pick that up. And I look forward to seeing the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe because, my God, these films, of course, they might not be the best of films, at least not all of them. They do each have their issues, I can agree to them, but they are certainly incredibly enjoyable, entertaining films. Some of them are, in fact, far above the others, head and shoulders above the others, and some of the best films I've seen in a while. While there are others that do have their problems, I can agree to the fact that this film, as a fan of the comic books and as a fan of film in general, really watching this universe come to life is something that has never been undertaken before, and is something worth seeing, in my opinion, on Blu-ray. If I really had to rank these 10 films, I'm going to say that the latest 2, Guardians of the Galaxy and The Winter Soldier, are amongst my favorites, followed by The Avengers. Coming up next, I'm actually going to say the original Captain America, The First Avenger, was a great film, and it gets a bit harder to rank. Then I'm going to go Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World figures in there too. I think Thor the Dark World was a lot of fun. And then finally, I would say The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2. My least favorite is Thor, but I did think Thor was a lot of fun. These 10 films are certainly worth owning, and this collection is going to expand ever so greatly. I will admit I'm not the biggest fan of this franchise, but my God, Men in Black 3 was one of the most fun films I've ever seen. And Brad Bird directed the best Mission Impossible film of the franchise, in my personal opinion, Ghost Protocol. Of course, leading into the 5th film coming out this July, that is Rogue Nation. This is, of course, a must-own to rewatch. It is one of the best action films I've ever seen. And, of course, that scene on the Burj Khalifa makes this film worth owning alone. And watching that come to life on Blu-ray and all of the action scenes that, of course, have some fantastic visual effects really make this film one worth owning. With incredible cinematography from director of photography Wally Pfister, who this is, in fact, one of his last films that he was a cinematographer on. Nonetheless, Moneyball is not just a visually striking film, but a great film in general, telling an incredibly underdog story, a true story, in fact, and one of the best of 2011. Monsters, Inc., which came out 14 years ago, still looks great in Blu-ray, surprisingly, and this film is almost unmatched in terms of my favorite Pixar films, minus 1 or 2 that I'll get to later on in this video. One of the best 3D experiences I had in the theater is one of the best 3D experiences you can have in your home. Pacific Rim, while a film that does have a few problems here and there, I believe it had pacing issues, and from a story perspective wasn't 100% spot on as I was hoping it would be. Nonetheless, visually, this is an absolute treat. Guillermo del Toro is known for having incredibly unique looking films, and this is certainly one of them. Owning this is certainly worthy, but at the same time, if you pick it up, please, by all means, do so in 3D. Of course, adding to the list of Christopher Nolan's incredibly complicated, intricate, and emotionally striking films, The Prestige brings, of course, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale in what are some of their best performances to date. A lot of debate over Prometheus. I do believe, in my opinion, while a lot of people will not agree with this, I actually preferred it to the original Alien, and while I might understand that as blasphemy from a film fan's sense, I think visually, at least, this is one of the most beautiful looking films to have come out in the past 5 years. Owning this for the simple visual elements alone makes it worthy. The special features, over 7 hours of bonus content, if I'm not mistaken, make this such an incredible tale with what I believe is Michael Fassbender's best performance. A film that came out just about a year and a half ago, telling what I believe is one of the most incredible sports rivalries to have occurred in history, that of James Hunt and Niki Lauda. Rush is one of Ron Howard's best films. And Sherlock Holmes is just so much fun. I know these two films shouldn't really be clubbed together. They both arguably made their director ever so famous. These two horror films have definitely sent chills to pretty much anyone who has watched them. To add to the list of must-owns, my personal favorite David Fincher film of all time, The Social Network, is, as you can read on the cover, a brilliant film, an American landmark. It's revolutionary, sensational. It is a mammoth and exhilarating, and it is a once-in-a-generation film telling us not just about the current generation, not just about social networking, but some of the deep, dark secrets of how this really came about, and what might be perceived as a biased film to some degree, but a film that, of course, has incredible visuals and one of the most beautiful stories as written by Aaron Sorkin, one of the best writers working today. A lot of superlatives have to be expressed in what is a must-own. I love the show, and this is brilliant. I never watched the show, but these two films are brilliant. This is, of course, every theatrically released Star Wars film, from episodes 1 through 6 and the Clone Wars. While yes, the prequels do get their fair share of hate, I will admit to the fact that I actually do enjoy them quite a bit. I do believe they don't match up in any means to the original trilogy, A New Hope, that is episode 4 being my favorite. And while, of course, these films have their issues with the Blu-ray changes, I still believe that they're worth owning simply because of the impeccable quality that you get to see, and for the fact that you're not going to get the theatrically released editions on Blu-ray for a very long time. I'm a Michael Jackson fan. This film is an easy watch, and it means so much to me. The special features on this too really do give you a great glimpse into the late King of Pop. One of Ben Affleck's earlier directed films, the extended edition, in fact, of The Town, has what I believe is one of Jeremy Renner's best performances. It's an incredibly intense film with really well-directed action sequences. This is, of course, an incredibly intricate, complicated, and yet beautiful film that is ever so worthy of owning, just because of not only Gary Oldman's fantastic performance, not only the fantastic performances of the cast, but the story that unveils itself ever so slowly, and yet ever so, dare I use the word perfectly, make this film so great and make this film part of my collection. A film, of course, that is a must-own just because of the success that it really is. One of the most financially successful films of all time, James Cameron's The Titanic, in fact in 3D. The 3D is surprisingly good. 3 films ever so near and dear to almost any child and any adult's heart. The Toy Story trilogy is perhaps a set of 3 of the greatest animated films of all time. Toy Story 3 is not just my favorite animated film of all time, it's probably one of the greatest films I've ever seen. This trilogy is so great. It did revolutionize the world of animation, and visually, once again, these 3 are absolute must-owns. Now, a bit of a warning before I show you the next 2 films. I do understand that these films are not particularly loved by most, but of the franchise, these 2 films I thought were worth owning. And this is the Transformers franchise I'm speaking of. I own the first and the third. I think the second and the fourth are not particularly great films, but the first I really enjoyed. The third, as a film, I didn't enjoy it as much, but as a visual experience, a 3D experience, it was so great that I had to pick it up on Blu-ray. I would almost say these are must-owns just because of how visually great they are. I would say the first film really is a must-own. The rest, not so much. You remember the first 7 minutes, you remember the rest of the film. It's gorgeous, buy it. What is arguably my favorite film of last year, Whiplash, is one of the most intense films I've ever seen, and one of the best, I do have to add. The special features on this are great. You get to see the original short that, of course, inspired the rest of the film, that made it an adapted screenplay where it technically really wasn't. However, this has one of the greatest performances in the last few years, that of J.K. Simmons, and at the same time is visually a really good Blu-ray to own. Another great animated film, my favorite of the Disney animations so far, Wreck-It Ralph, almost brought me to tears by the end of it. And now, of all the X-Men films I could have bought, these 2 I only really thought were worthy of buying, and I thought were, of course, the 2 best. I'm a fan of the original trilogy to some degree, X-Men 2 being my favorite. However, these 2 films, I believe, are head and shoulders above the rest. Some of the best films I've seen, comic book, of course, and action, and just films in general over the past few years. Definitely really enjoyable, creating this younger set of characters that works so well in this universe. I do understand that X-Men Days of Future Past might have been more financially successful, but if I really had to say that one of these is must-own, it has to be X-Men First Class. It's really hard for me to put into words just how much I love this film, how it really connected with this singular story, in fact, of this one man trapped between a boulder, between essentially a rock and a hard place for about 90 minutes. James Franco gives the performance of a lifetime in what I believe is a very unique film, just in the fact that you're not going to get to see something as inspirational, motivating, yet heart-wrenching, and just this incredible dialectic of emotions all coming together And no collection is complete without some comedy. That is 21 and 22 Jump Street. Phil Lord and Chris Miller deliver films that are so just weirdly funny that work well for me especially. I really connected with the humor in these films. It's more my kind of strange parody yet awkward humor that worked well, and definitely two films that, especially if you're a fan of them, have a lot of repeat viewing to be done, as well as the deleted scenes and special features are pretty damn good. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my 100 Blu-ray collection, and that is, of course, my 300th video. Thank you so much for watching. Just to recap, the 20 must-owns, I guess I would really add to the list, are Avatar, preferably in 3D, Casino Royale, The Dark Knight Trilogy, The Departed, The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, Gravity, preferably in 3D, Inception, The Lord of the Rings Trilogy, the Extended Edition, The Social Network, Titanic, again, 3D, the Toy Story Trilogy, the original Transformers, and X-Men First Class. Again, these aren't necessarily the 20 best of the 100 that I have, but in terms of the number of people that own them and have them as part of their collections, in terms of how they work well as Blu-rays from a visual perspective, these 20 are must-owns. In fact, these 100 are must-owns, and be sure to comment below on the Blu-rays that you own, on the ones that you hope to buy, on this video in general. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and I hope to really expand my collection in the years to come.